Hello there. Strikes in Britain's NHS health service have sparked concerns about huge shortages in emergency rooms and of emergency doctors. NHS leaders are deeply concerned at the level of suffering and risk that patients may face tomorrow and beyond, is what Matthew Taylor, chief of the NHS Confederation, which brings together health service organizations, wrote in a letter to Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. Already on Tuesday, tens of thousands of nurses and employees of the NHS in clinics stopped working to emphasize their demand for significantly higher wages. It is the first time the Royal College of Nursing, the RCN industry body, has called on its members to strike in its more than 100-year history. Taylor urged Sunak to end the argument quickly. The Conservative head of government rejected current improvements in wages. There is no leeway for this in the financial year running until the beginning of April. It's what Sunak told the Daily Mail newspaper. However, he indicated more accommodation in the next year. So procrastinate or what? 3 emergency services in different parts of England declared a state of emergency on Tuesday. There are significant delays, said the North East Ambulance Service. NHS workers are also protesting their working conditions. Critics speak of a vicious circle. Emergency doctors need many times longer than prescribed to get to emergency patients. Ambulances, in turn, queue for hours in front of emergency rooms to hand over patients. In addition, more than 7 million people are waiting for routine interventions. One reason for this is that the corona pandemic has caused a huge backlog of treatments. Elizabeth Davies, for example, is said to have been lying on the ground with a broken hip for 25 hours after a fall on Saturday before an ambulance finally arrived at her retirement home in Wales. The relatives called the emergency number at least 10 times in vain. Help only arrived on Sunday around 1:15 p.m. Davies was taken to hospital in Bangor, according to a report by the British Guardian. But there, she had to wait another 12 hours until she finally landed in a hospital ward and got a diagnosis and could be operated on. Davies' son Ian called the incident completely unacceptable. It was devastating to see her lying on the floor screaming in pain for 24 hours, he said. And Welsh ambulance officials cited winter weather, high demand, and high level of sickness among the staff as the excuse. However, there's currently chaos in healthcare in Wales and parts of England anyway. As I said already on Tuesday, tens of thousands of nurses and hospital staff went on strike for the second time in a week, and another strike is planned for December 28th. In the face of a strike by ambulance drivers, the British Health Service NHS has called on the population to avoid all emergency risks. People can help by taking sensible steps to protect themselves and others at this time and not end up in the emergency room, said NHS England Medical Director Stephen Powers. This includes drinking alcohol responsibly, looking out for family members or neighbors, and stocking up on medication. Secretary of State Will Quince had previously warned against contact sports and what he calls risky activities. Ambulance drivers across much of England and Wales plan to strike on Wednesday in support of their demands for higher wages and, as they always stress, better working conditions. The NHS urged people to use the emergency services wisely and only call an ambulance in a life-threatening emergency. The union had promised that urgent emergency services would not be affected by the strikes. However, the waiting times for ambulances are already significantly longer than originally planned. And 750 soldiers are to step in during the strikes and drive ambulances. However, they are not intended for emergency use, but rather for transport. The Conservative government points out that its tariff offer is in line with a proposal of an independent expert commission. Wage increases beyond this cannot be financed. But the NHS is chronically underfunded. Infirmaries are overcrowded. In emergency rooms, ambulance crews sometimes wait several hours to hand over their patients, as I said. And according to preliminary information, the GDP in the United Kingdom had already contracted by 0.2% in the third quarter. So what's better next year, they can't tell me. Initially, this trend towards a noticeable weakness in the British economy will continue. Analysts would expect a real growth rate of just -1% for 2023 as a whole. And the extensive rate hikes that the Bank of England had to implement as a reaction to the unsatisfactorily high inflation rates would certainly also play a role in explaining this development. And in addition, Brexit is still reverberating. In the fight against inflation, the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee, the MPC, announced another interest rate hike in December. As expected, the key interest rate was increased by 50 BP, and once again, the Monetary Policy Committee was unable to reach unanimity in voting on the Bank of England's future monetary policy. So I don't see anything getting better there. With Swati Dhingra and Silvana Tenreiro, two members of this body had spoken out in favor of significantly more caution when redesigning British monetary policy and accordingly voted for a constant bank rate. In contrast, Catherine Mann even favored a rate hike of 75 BP. And this news is not a big surprise either. However, one could certainly have expected more votes for a sharp rate hike of 75 BPs. In view of the expected slow normalization of inflation and the clear sign of a slowdown in the economy, the time window in which the hawkish central bankers in London could still raise the key interest rate is getting smaller and smaller. For this reason, Catherine Mann has recently spoken out in favor of raising the bank rate by these 75 BPs. They obviously follow the motto now or never. On the other hand, some central bankers are now also becoming very concerned about the state of the British economy. The inflation rates in Great Britain are likely to fall to a level acceptable to the central bank again in the course of 2023. Ceteris paribus, that means without further action by the English bank. In addition, the British economy is currently slipping into a recession. The central bank's projections show that those responsible for monetary policy are more than aware of this danger. And this should increasingly raise the question of whether the bank rate should be raised at all in 2023. Indications would meanwhile pointing in the direction that the critics of the latest rate hikes would gradually gain support from the camp of the moderate members of the MPC. And so they don't even agree on something, and it will be a very interesting year 2023. But the later part of the video was to show that the promises of the government for next year are something, again, we know from this Tory government. How can they in April suggest that there will be much more money than there is now under these conditions? There is nothing better in April. In the end of 2023, we might see some improvement, but they still will be in a recession. In 2024, we might see some improvement. But after 12 years and the loss of real wages and a massive loss of real wages, how long do they want the NHS employees to wait? This is just unbelievable, and I completely understand the people striking. I'm definitely, in general, not a friend of the unions. I'm a conservative myself, and I'm definitely no social democrat. But you can only take a certain amount of what was happening in the last 12 years, and I understand that. And I understand the urge for the need of action right now. Because if you want to stop something like this happening, you need a reasonable policy beforehand. And then you can say, don't be unreasonable, guys. But in this case, I can't say they are unreasonable. The unions are not unreasonable at the moment when you look at the price hikes and, of course, what happened in the last 12 years with the real wages of the people striking now. And that is the point. And if you don't even get the inflation rates, what do you want to do? And I'll see you in my next video. I'll be back.